Welcome to the M1 Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Sadu, and today we've got Dr. Mike Israetel back on the show for the second time to chat about the motivational process. So essentially from start to finish, and specifically in regards to a healthy eating pattern. I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. Mike is a funny dude, so don't mind me chuckling here and there in the background, but let's dig right in. Mike, thanks for coming back on the pod, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So we're just going to dive right in here. We know diets work, and regardless, some folks are still sort of caught up arguing over which diet is the best, low carb, high carb, keto, vegan, list goes on. They all have their place, their tools, but what they all have in common is difficulty around adherence or following the diet. So you have this 6-stage process or hierarchy around thinking about adherence. And I'm stoked to talk about this because most folks get stuck at the motivation stage, I find. They're either motivated or they're not, and then their entire diet or exercise regimen is determined by how they feel moment to moment from a motivation standpoint. So I think it'd be super helpful for folks. Can we go through these 6 constructs and delve into each step individually, starting with inspiration here, Mike?
You bet. Absolutely. So inspiration. Inspiration can be thought of as the most important of these, but only in the sense that it's the one that gets you in the door. You could say like the most important thing to vaccine research is money, but like, money doesn't just turn into vaccines, right? Like having very good scientists is in a sense more important, but without money, nothing ever happens, right? So it's like a primacy effect. So inspiration is that thing, that sort of light bulb moment, and it could be a very bright light bulb for a positive experience or a very dark light bulb for the negative experience, that gets you from, you could say it's in the formal psychology from pre-contemplation to contemplation or from contemplation to action, right? And it's what gets you doing it. It's what gets you to begin the diet, for example. This can apply to anything. It can apply to exercise. It can apply to doing your taxes, anything. So inspiration, the great thing about it is it's some kind of sort of kick in the ass, for lack of a better term, to get you to start. It can be positive. For example, you see a coworker at work getting in a really great shape, and you're like, "Oh my God, Janice! Like, how did you do it?" She's like, "I just did this, diet, and I feel so great." And all of a sudden, you're like, "Man, Janice is like a regular person. I can do this too." And you feel inspired, and then it pushes you over the edge to be like, "All right, I'm going to try this." Right? Inspiration can also be negative. Like a typical example I give is maybe you work in an office building that's 5 stories tall. You work on the 5th floor, and the elevator usually works as elevators tend to do, but then they're doing repairs, maybe they're upgrading the elevator, and you have to go up a flight of stairs, and you haven't done this in some number of years. Maybe you live mostly sedentary lifestyle. All of a sudden, you get to the top of the stairs, and you're wheezing, and you're gasping, and you're like, "Oh my God, I just feel like total crap. Like, this is awful. Like, I used to play sports. I used to be active. And I'm clearly like, I knew I was overweight, but I thought I was carrying it well. I didn't think it was affecting me." So that negative experience could be, you know what? I am Googling diets right now because I've had enough. And so inspiration is, in that sense, super important. And this is why social media influencers, I know, terrible term, but I can explain. Influencers like to say that their mission is to inspire people. And in part, they're correct. It's sort of like a really, really great idea because some people do need inspiring. Many, many people need inspiring. But the downside of inspiration is that it doesn't last long. It's like how many people are inspired to take up boxing after they leave like one of the Creed movies or something like that? Like a lot, like thousands. And how many people actually end up going through buying a gym membership at a boxing club, getting a coach, and or even, okay, let's say they do that. How many people last past the first week? Well, almost nobody, relatively speaking, some tiny fraction of a percentage. So inspiration is awesome and necessary, but it's not enough. The next construct has to take over after that.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's so true around going to like a Creed movie or boxing movie or something, and someone's like, "Oh, I'm going to start training" or whatever. How long do you think that actually lasts? Is it like 24 hours? Like they wake up the next day and they're like, how long do you think that actually lasts?
Sure. So sometimes inspiration lasts, can be measured in seconds. The most I think salient determining factor of inspiration's time course is whether or not, or at what point you start to have something else pressing on your mind, right? If you got some other stuff to do, that it doesn't really matter how inspired you felt. Sometimes that other stuff just is on your brain. And because inspiration is, well, it is really kind of an emotion. Mostly, it's not a whole lot of cognition behind it. Once that emotion passes, you sort of like can't really reimagine it. It's really, really difficult. It's kind of like, in the moment during, let's say, I'm going to use the worst analogy ever, but like, in the moment when you were interacting with someone that you were super attracted to, you felt like, oh my God, this person's amazing. And then like, let's say you had an argument with them, like after the argument or during, sometimes like someone like pulls you aside, aliens, zip you up to the ship and like, okay, imagine your friend that you were super attracted to. Now, are you still attracted to him? And you're like, I hate him. And they're like, imagine being attracted. You're like, I can't. It's not my current emotional state. So when that state passes, sometimes you're done. Oftentimes that's, I'm going to say it's seconds. Sometimes it's minutes. Most often, I think it's hours. And a big one, really, and this is part of the behavioral research that folks have done, where if you feel the urge to do something, write it down and or start making plans to do it then. Because a big limiting factor often is the next day. Because like for the better, sleep is a giant reset, right? You don't carry most of your emotions from the day before into your waking life the day after, which is like great, right? In many respects, because like it's good to be able to reset. But if you feel inspired Friday night, Saturday morning, someone could be like, hey, still joining that gym? You're like, what? Oh, yeah, I guess I was excited. So if you're going to do something, if you get inspired at 9 a.m, charitably, you have until, when you go to sleep to start somehow either write something down, Google some things, because if you let it go that far, there's a huge drop off for the next day. Huge, which is why, interestingly enough, this is kind of conciliant with some other sort of folk notions of psychology. The recommended advice of important decisions is, why don't you sleep on it, right? Like there's a really good reason, 2 good reasons people say sleep on it. One, sleep is an integration or reintegration of neural circuitry, so it actually can give you more wisdom, okay, because the new data that you're trying to decide on can be integrated with old data. But that's probably a minor reason of why that recommendation has been said so many times in so many cultures, is because before you slept on something, you're in an emotional state that biases you to make a decision in some case or another. And when it's a big decision, and let's be honest, starting a diet, not a huge decision in the terms of like what is pertinent to human life, like marrying someone, paying $3,000 for a big vacation, switching your major, right? People say sleep on it because they know that whatever transient emotions you're feeling that could lead to a good or bad decision will pretty much be gone by the next day. And then when you sleep on it, you wake up in the morning, someone's like, so you're still going to change your major? If you're like, yes, absolutely, I know it's a good idea, then yes, you probably thought it through and it's probably floated along by more than just a feeble emotion. But if you say, oh, that was a stupid idea, you probably feel differently that day or feel more normal. However, that being said, exercise and dieting is so good for you. It's often so much resistance to it internally because it's tough, right? Restriction, like nobody actively wants to restrict themselves. Like tomorrow I'll do something that makes me not enjoy myself for 12 weeks as much as I could. Like it sucks. So when the inspiration does hit, I say don't sleep on it. Probably start looking into changing your diet because at the end of the day it's for the better. When you have that spark, I would use it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So inspiration, the half-life is super short. So if you're feeling it, act on it quick because otherwise you wake up the next day and you're just going to have to find a way to re-inspire yourself somehow and get the ball rolling.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So moving on to motivation. So we start with inspiration, then we move to motivation. How does that play out?
So the key to understanding the difference between inspiration and motivation is the following. So first of all, motivation lasts a long time. It's essentially something that's permanent under some conditions. Now, one of the conditions is it ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're very motivated to just kick butt and do what it takes. And motivation is also an emotion, but it is an emotion that allows you to do whatever it takes to get the job done, right? So when you're feeling motivated to, like, you're a teacher, you're feeling motivated to grade papers, grading papers seems like the easiest, most fun work in the world. And when you're not motivated, it seems like, oh my God, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do to grade these papers. So this is insurmountable effort. I have no idea how anyone's ever done this before. The thing about motivation is it ebbs and flows. Sometimes in the periods of minutes and hours, often in the periods of several days. Especially with dieting, motivation tends to ebb and flow in several day cycles, which is to say that you'll have a few days where you're just like karate kicking your diet in the face, and you'll have a few days where you're like, yeah, this is fine. And then you'll have a few days where you're like, I want to live inside a pizza and eat my way out, and I never want to see a diet again. And then the really cool thing, super awesome insight, is that the ebbs back. So like people say like, oh my God, I'm so unmotivated. And we'll have some strategies for dealing with that I'll mention a little bit. But the first piece of good news you can give people is like, it's okay. Your motivation will come back. It's not something that just dries up. If you've ever had it ebb, it will come back and ebb and flow again. Like it's just part of what's going on. You know what I mean? So it's definitely nothing to get too worried about if it goes away, but you have to understand that it does have this pulsatility to it. The key thing that transfers inspiration into motivation, and this is huge point, is a goal. Motivation almost can be defined as the inspiration long-term to accomplish a certain goal. Without the goal, motivation is, first of all, difficult to even define. And second of all, it will ebb and flow completely out of existence because it has nothing to attach itself to. Like if you feel, for example, inspired to go on a walk, how long is your walk going to be? I can tell you exactly how long it's going to be, until and unless you're no longer inspired to walk anymore. And then you're going to turn the fuck back around because you're like, why the hell am I out? Right? When you're motivated, you have to be motivated for something. And motivated to go on a walk is not specific enough. So a really awesome way in which we can give birth to and really boost our motivation is to make specific goals with specific timelines. For example, I'm very motivated to go to the store. I'm going to walk to the store. I'm going to buy the veggies I have to buy because veggies, you got to get them sort of fresh and buy them more often than other groceries. And I'm going to bring these veggies back and put them in the fridge. Okay. Now that's your goal. It's a fucking simple goal, all right? Brutally simple. But then again, dieting is not that complex of an endeavor anyway. So now that you're motivated to go to the store, what are the chances that your walk will arbitrarily end with you getting 95% of the way to the store and then turning around? Low, hopefully, right? Certainly low. Maybe you get 50% of the way there. You're like, it's too hot. F this, I'm going to get my car. But like 95% of the way to the store, you're almost certainly getting it to the store. And if aliens were studying human behavior from space, whatever, with a super micro zoom lens, they would pretty quickly define, like, okay, some people just seem to be walking around aimlessly, but some people, like, really, no matter how many obstacles you put in their way, reasonable ones, like, there's a barking dog or a piece of poop or a car pulls in front of you. Like, if you're motivated to go to the store, you will walk around those things, right? And you will have a distinct sensation of when you've accomplished your goal. Just the same way in dieting. Here's the deal. Super important point. You may be inspired to lose weight, right? When you talk about motivation, the biggest way to anchor that is to lose weight, okay, when and how much. Because then you can look at those numbers and go, this is when success happens. When I reach this number by this date, I can check this box and accomplish something. Motivation is always in reference to a finite thing that accomplishes, period. Right? So whether or not what that is, it doesn't so much matter. The important thing is that it's realistic and most of the time challenging. Now, the challenge kind of takes care of itself because dieting sucks. But the realism is something we have to really take care to do. For example, if you're motivated and you want to maximize your motivation, let's say you give yourself the goal of losing 80 pounds in 3 months. Okay. When you're clearly not remotely on track after a few weeks, how motivated are you going to be? Oh my God, devastated, the opposite, right? But if you give yourself the goal to lose 12 pounds in 3 months, and after the first month you've lost 6, you're like, oh my God. You know that feeling of being on a fat loss plan and getting off the scale, having like just slightly beat your goal for that week? You're just like, oh, I can do anything. I am immortal, right? Like, That's an awesome feeling. And that's a reinvigoration of motivation that can only happen if you are in reference to a goal. This is one of the big reasons why people who lift weights, for example, or exercise with no goals at all fall off the map way more than everybody else who has a goal. Because, I mean, what keeps you coming to the gym? If you're like, oh, the workouts are nice. When it's raining, is that really going to keep you coming to the gym? But if you're motivated to bench press 200 pounds or to lose 15 pounds and the gym is part of the process, it's going to be tough to stop you, especially if you get that bloodhound whiff of initial consistent success based on your own performance. If you experience that your own strides have been working, man, that is going to help a ton with your motivation. And if what you're doing is working and you can see that it's working, there's a very low chance that you're going to stop in any reasonable circumstance.
That was brilliantly explained, man. And sort of the key takeaway that I got from that is like, okay, when you're motivated, be sure to set very specific goals with time deadlines. And then once you set those bigger goals, do you actually recommend sort of backing out of those goals and setting smaller periodic goals? Say someone wants to lose, 10 pounds over the course of the month. So should they really focus on that 2.5 pounds per week? Like, do you recommend them breaking it down?
Absolutely. You have to break it down into smaller chunks that operate on the time course of motivation. So I said motivation ebbs and flows over usually a period of days. This means that within a period of just slightly longer than that, there has to be some remotivation going on, right? If you're motivated to lose 15 pounds, you measure yourself on the scale once, you don't step on the scale at all. And then 3 months later, you're like, hey, I did it. Or, oh, I didn't. That's not really technically speaking, it's better to have that goal, because at least when you're about to shove extra food in your face that you're not supposed to be eating, at least your goal hits you in the face. Like in your mind, you're like, oh, I'm supposed to lose that weight. Better not, right? But if you have constant reinforcement, it's even better. So you want, there's such a thing as too much reinforcement, where people get too caught up in like the daily fluctuations of their body weight, right? But a weekly average, maybe every 2 weeks, a real good idea. Because, if your motivation falls a little lower and you're like, oh, I don't know, that you weigh in and you're on track, you're like, oh my God, this is incredible. I'm doing it. And all of a sudden motivation comes back. So it's absolutely a good idea, to your point, to have a regular schedule of breaking down into smaller goals.
That's awesome, man. So then once that motivation piece is in place, someone's setting their goals, they're breaking those goals down, they've got a target. How does motivation differ from number 3, intention?
Yeah. So motivation gives you the goal, but it doesn't give you the process. Like, I can have a goal of being in the Olympics in 2021. Yay. Hell, I'm even motivated. You could say it's quite objective a goal. You're either in the Olympics or you're not, right? And looking up various sports stats to see what I'd have to run or lift or play in tennis or whatever, it's all, clearly there's just very easy to figure out how good you have to be. But the problem is like, what is my actual plan? Okay, and the actual plan is what gets you to do the things that will accomplish your goal. So for example, in dieting, you could be motivated, to lose weight. But what the hell does that mean day to day, right? Like, you're not like grimace in the mirror and then lose weight, right? That's not going to happen, right? You're not going to like take chunks of yourself off. It's not like a problem that's inherently like, duh. Like if someone says, hey, move this sand pile over here. Like, okay, obviously you're going to pick up sand and move it. It's not that hard. But weight loss is a little bit like, okay, I have to do something. So that's where intention comes in. Intention is, here's my goal from motivation. And now the following behaviors are ones I intend to do, to actually do. They're the ones that are getting me closer to my goal. So for example, I am motivated to lose weight. I intend to eat 5 pre-planned meals per day. I am motivated to lose weight. I intend on getting at least 10,000 steps per day on my step calculator phone. Things like that. So Your intentions set the bare minimum mark of things you have to check off the list in order to get where you're going. So I intend to walk to the store. I'm going to leave right now. I'm going to take a right on Girard and a left on Franklin, and the store will be right there. Like, it sounds crazy, right? But like, it's kind of just a roadmap to where you're going so that you don't like just have this fantasy. Because in large sense, a lot of times motivations end up being tough by themselves because lots of people are motivated, but their plan ends up being not there. And what is that, the old trope? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That has a lot of weight behind it because it's just mostly true. But here's the thing. If you have a plan of some kind, you know exactly what you need to do to stay on track for your goal. And then it's not really a mystery. And all of a sudden, a lot of pieces are starting to fit.
Absolutely, man. So one of the distinctions that I heard between sort of just being interested in a goal or achieving something and being committed to that goal and achieving that thing is like when you're interested, you'll basically just only do it when it's convenient. But if you're committed, you essentially refuse to accept anything but the result you're after. So is that how somebody could think about the difference there?
Absolutely. That doing it when you don't want it means following the plan no matter what. And the plan is set by your intention. Like intention is like a watermark. Here is the watermark. I have to reach the watermark. That is what I can consider a success. So when someone asks me, am I on track to meet my goals? If I'm meeting my intentions, then the answer is yes, right? Because someone could say like, are you motivated to lose weight? You're like, yes. How did you eat today? They're like, well, what do you mean? Like I had food, like, okay. You can convince me a little bit better if you actually demonstrated that you're doing something. You know, like imagine a, well, you know, it's the COVID times. So I'll use a COVID analogy. Imagine someone has a company that's designing COVID vaccine and they're asking for external funding from investors and they have a huge investor meeting. You know, is it good enough to tell the investors, hey, listen, you know, here's our goal, vaccine by January 2021. Like that's our long-term goal. And we have all these mini goals in between. Like here's when we want to have phase 1 trials. Here's when we want to have phase 2, phase 3, approval, et cetera. At least one investor, and by that I mean 90% of investors, if this never gets brought up, is going to raise their hands and be like, okay, what's your actual weekly plan to get this done? Like, do we have any equipment on hand to like actually design vaccines? Can you imagine being like, well, no. Like, do you have plans to requisition that equipment? No, also no. Like, that's insane. Like, I can draw up a roadmap to launching, you know, to taking Jupiter, putting in a gravity well and having it collide with Saturn. Easy. I can even give you a time plan for that. Like, oh, by December of next year. But what am I going to do to make that happen? That's super, super important, right? So in order to be taken seriously, intentions matter a ton. What are you actually going to do? And here's the thing. Do you have to take dieting seriously? No, only if you want to succeed. Because nobody's coming to your house. Your diet is not a COVID committee on vaccines. Nobody cares if you lose weight or gain weight or become healthier, but you do, right? So if you're going to take your own dieting seriously, I would make sure I had a plan because that's serious and not just serious. It tells me what I have to do to succeed. Wishes are not good enough. At the end of the day, if we're going to try to like dirty the concept of motivation, we'd say it's just a wish. You know, someone could tell you how easy it is to say, I'm going to, you know, win the Mr. Olympia contest. It's like, oh, sure. You could even be motivated to do it. But what are you intending to do about it? Are you going to do the training? Are you going to take the supplements? Are you going to eat the food? You're like, well, hell no. I'm not going to do any of that stuff because that's something, again, you may see it on paper and you're like, wait, this isn't surmountable. There's no way I can do this, right? But if you set your intentions realistically, which means your goal is realistic, then all of a sudden, not only do you have like a grounding of like, oh, wow, like I can do this, you also have the plan to do it with.
Absolutely, man. Now, how does accountability potentially fit in there? Because some folks find it easier to have an external mode of accountability. So for example, these are the people that hire trainers or they have nutrition coaches or whatever, versus the people that just hold themselves accountable. They stick to their word. They say they're going to do something and they just do it. How does the accountability piece fit into intention?
Sure. I think that starts to mix into the concept of discipline.
Perfect.
So the next concept after intention is discipline. And discipline has to be brought in because of the following thing that results. If we consider your intention is the sort of minimum watermark of adherence, like I must eat X meals per day and no more, or whatever. I must do this much activity. I must train 4 times a week. That's the line of your intention. If we mapped it on a y-axis, it would be here's the adherence level, and intention's a line that cuts across it. Like we need you to adhere at least this much. Right? And if you do extra, great, but you don't have to. Motivation, remember, waxes and wanes. It sort of goes up and down in waves. There will be a time in most folks' pursuit of dieting or exercise or whatever, there will be a time when their intention line is, let's say, at a 10, and their motivation dips to an 8, below intention, which by definition means you are not sufficiently motivated at that point in time to meet your intentions, to honor your goals. Like it says, eat this much food, and you're like, and you literally tell yourself, I don't feel like it. Because motivation is at the end of the day an emotion, right? So you say, like I definitely, something is missing. How do we close that gap? Because like what I'm talking about right now, and tons of people who maybe have listened this far in the podcast, you're gonna be like, yeah, no shit. You finally get to the only part of this that matters. Like it's okay, I can get a plan off the internet for fat loss like now, but like how do I get it done? It's tough. It is tough. That's where discipline comes in. And discipline is easily defined as the use of willpower to close the gap between motivation and intention. So some folks don't have a gap at all. Folks like you and I who are in the fitness lifestyle, like fully invested 100%, almost never do we have a point where our motivation doesn't meet our intentions because we're like psychotic and actually, well, passionate, which is another construct we'll talk about in a little bit. But that means our motivation, even at its lowest lows, is higher than our intentions. Like I don't remember the last time I didn't go to the gym because I didn't feel like it. Like I always feel at least enough up to go to the gym and get my work done, right? It might not be extra credit work, but it's going to get it done. However, for most people, it is very, very common for them to have only enough motivation at the very peak of their motivation ebb and flow to meet their intentions. And oftentimes they're in these valleys where there's just not enough motivation to get you to do what you need. Discipline is taking willpower and filling in the blanks, right? It's the act of, you don't want to go to the gym, but you have this intention because you're a red-blooded human being. You God damn it, I'm going to the gym. I don't care if I like it. I don't care if I'm motivated. I intended to go to the gym. And because of the concept of honor, I am going to the gym because I'm going to be honoring myself today by meeting my own promises. Now, is that an incredible thing? Of course. Is it necessary for almost all people to exert their discipline by applying willpower to meet the gap, to fill in the gap between motivation and intention, to make sure they meet their intentions? Yes. However, there's a huge downside. It's not really so much of a downside as just a limiting factor. Willpower, the fuel of discipline, can be seen as a limited resource. It is a renewable resource, but it can be drawn out faster than it renews, right? So if you really, really use a ton of willpower over the past several days because, your life is chaotic and the grocery store changed its hours or kids are too busy, you have to drive them here, drive them there, and you couldn't get your diet food together, you might have used so much willpower that you sort of start running low on it. And this is a concept in psychology which is pretty well vetted in the literature. Willpower does have like this thing where it doesn't, after a while, it kind of sort of, the battery gets low. Now it's a rechargeable battery, which means that if you take a break, or if you have some very high motivation times, or if your intentions are easily met some other way, maybe through some convenience, like your meals are pre-ordered for you, or you have someone helping cooking your meals, so on and so forth, your willpower can and does recharge. And there's also decent evidence that after using your willpower many, many times, you actually get better at using it. You sort of in a sense, have more of it. Now, it's still finite, but it's great to have a lot of a finite thing because it'll last you longer through potentially more difficult circumstances. So discipline is super, super important to have. And the more you can have it, the better. The more willpower you have to use, the better. But you have to understand it's temporary. It is only for filling the gaps between intention and motivation in a realistic way. Now, if you set such crazy, crazy goals that there's always a giant gaping hole between your intentions and your motivation, like let's say your intention as calculated to become the strongest human in the world is to do like 10 hours of working out per day. Okay. Like how much motivation could you possibly have to never during that training cycle of 5 weeks be like, I can't do this. Okay. After like 2 days, you're going to have that. And there's no, and then you might have a day or two's left of willpower. And when that shit runs out, you're done. Like, and that's literally called burnout. Okay, that's what burnout is when you run out of willpower plus motivation and you still haven't reached your intentions, right? So that's a nasty thing. So comes back to super, super, super important point of our goals have to be realistic. And one of the things we do at RP pretty well, so for example, we have this app, right, that helps you build a diet. It builds a diet for you based on what you tell in your schedule, so on and so forth. When you choose a rate of weight loss, it actually recommends to you a very moderate rate of weight loss and plenty of time to accomplish it, because it knows that if you choose a really high number of weight to lose per week and thus per month, your chances of your intentions being crazy high compared to your motivation is just really, really high. And we don't want to set up people for failure. But do we want to tell people our app's going to get you to lose 3 pounds a week forever? Sure, we would love that if it was true, but it's not. So even if we have some values you can pick safely, you can pick up to 1% weight loss per week. You're allowed to pick it in the app. But if you do, the app flashes a little thing at you and says, hey, now, this is really hard based on tons of user experience and basic science. So we just want you to know that we really would recommend you pick the following number that seems much more reasonable. You can always say, no, thanks, I know what I'm doing. But we do offer that. Part of this, because it's part of just basic psychology here, what we're discussing is that there's discipline only goes so far. And another note of that is there's a bunch of gurus that talk about discipline, and they're super, super important. Like Jocko Willink is an example, right? Super Greek guy, talks about discipline and not having tons of pity for yourself and all this other shit. Amazing, right? And most guys like that make really good points. Some of the folks, but I don't want to say too much of an emphasis on discipline. They estimate discipline as being overpowered compared to the other constructs. They say it's all, I'm sure you've heard quotes like this, Marcus, like it all comes down to discipline. Like discipline's the thing that matters. Like,
right.
Yeah, in hard times, yes. Okay. But like discipline alone cannot get you to your goal, because the shit lasts for like a day or two if you burn pure willpower, right? Like, the CIA and other intelligence organizations was sort of like, it's kind of public knowledge to whatever extent that everyone breaks. You know what I mean? Like if you deprive someone of sleep for long enough and confuse the shit out of them and beat the crap out of them, sooner or later everyone breaks and they just tell you state secrets and stuff like that, right? Which is another way of saying that willpower is short-term, right? It can be drained. And in that case, that's the willpower and the discipline to not share state secrets, right? So it's definitely, we have to understand that discipline is important, and no discussion of motivation can be without discipline. And a lot of, there's the super hardcore sort of like maybe right-wing discipline side, like you're a pussy, do what it takes, stop whining to mommy, discipline. Then there's the other side, which is like ultra progressive kindergarten teacher approach to goal success, which is like, make sure you surround yourself with positive people and make sure everyone's loving and make sure to set super easy goals. Like, yeah, that stuff also helps. But at some point, the shit will get hard. And nobody in the world is going to be able to do shit for you unless you do it yourself. So it's one of those things that we shouldn't overvalue discipline. It's not going to take us all the way, but it is an absolutely essential piece of the puzzle. Now, that's a hell of a roundabout way to get to your initial point of other people holding accountable. Other people holding you accountable can be another tool that allows you to fill the gap between motivation and intention, because in some sense, it can let you use less willpower to accomplish a task, because instead of willpower, it's using, I don't want to say shaming, but social expectation dynamics to fill in the gap. Because all of a sudden, it's not just willpower boosting you up to your intentions, it's social expectation dynamics pulling you up. Because somebody could say, like, hey, you know, like if a coach checks in with you every other day and says, how's your diet? And when you're about to eat the cheeseburger or the 5th cheeseburger you're not allowed to on your diet, right? When you're about to do that, you think to yourself, what the hell am I going to tell my coach? Social expectation, humans are social animals, hits you and you go, damn it, there's no way I'm going to be able to scuzz around and lie to my coach. I can't do this. I got to stick to the plan. And it almost this social expectation, either in a positive way to impress your coach or in a negative way. So a positive way pulls you up to intention. In a negative way, pushes you away from the bottom end of that, pushes you away from motivation, saying, you know, I want no part of failure, right? The thing is, because it's kind of a separate mechanism, it requires less willpower to execute. Now, you might have needed 10 units of willpower if you're on your own. Maybe with a coach and a social expectation, you might need 5. Right, which is awesome, because that's just like in any one stretch of time, you're exposed to whatever number of units of willpower at any one time. Statistically, sometimes it's going to be tough. If you have a coach on your side, the chances of failure are just going to be lower because they're going to be covering your back most of the time. Now, that being said, is the last thing I'll say before I interrupt my ridiculously long rant. It still won't save you 100%. No matter what, because people always talk about a support structure, support network. I'm dieting with my coworkers and I have my coach and blah, 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 and the meals get delivered. All that stuff will close the gap between motivation and intention a lot, but not completely, not all the time. And you still have to be disciplined and still have to use your own fucking willpower at some point, if for nothing else, to put the fork to your face or to put the fork down, okay? Why do I say this? Why do I make a point to say this? Because I have coached, God knows how many people. Our digital products at RP have coached probably coming up on 1 million people or something like that. Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, who also works for RP, is an obesity specialist. Him and I have had numerous conversations on this topic. Folks, in some situations, can be given all of the support in the world, unbelievably intricate plans, and they don't do the basic, super easy work on their part. They just don't. You know the way you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink? Holy crap. You sure as hell can't stop it from eating. I'll tell you that. So it's one of those things where, yes, it's almost, it's not a contradiction, but you want to pad your construct as much as possible. So you have to use as little willpower as possible. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're ready to use it, right? Easy analogy is, yes, go out and get self-defense training. Yes, learn how to use a legally registered firearm. But at the same time, don't go to stupid, bad neighborhoods and get into arguments with people at 7-Elevens, because that's how you get shot. So you can do both, right? Because the reason you're taking self-defense, the reason you're getting a legally registered firearm is not so that you can win in a confrontation, period. It's that you also want to do everything you can to minimize confrontations, but you want to be prepared for when they happen. Just the same way, yes, hire a coach. Yes, do whatever kind of support system that works for you. Maybe dieting with friends, letting your family know about your expectations. But at the end of the day, you got to have your firearm in your back pocket and your martial arts training. You got to have willpower. Discipline, power by willpower, because the shit will hit the fan sooner or later. And if you have enough of that stuff, you can make it to the next hump where motivation is high enough and you don't have to worry about a thing and everything's super easy.
This is really cool, man. I'm glad we're talking about this, because the sort of through line that I'm seeing is like, set yourself up for success. And something that I talk about all the time is setting your food environment up in a way that is conducive to your goals versus it goes against your goals. And that way you don't have to use willpower when it's really not necessary. So you just don't want to deplete that resource when you don't have to by having all sorts of like cookies, cakes, cereal and shit on the counter. You're constantly looking at it all the time versus just it not being an option. So that setting yourself up for success piece seems to be crucially important.
Super important. And one more thing I'll say on that. There are folks that for some reason or another, well, I know the reason, that reason is ego. They will shy away from support systems because they say things like, if it's not a challenge to me, I won't do it. What are you talking about? So you don't ever do things that are easy. You don't ever sit on the couch. You don't ever eat tasty food. You don't ever watch movies that you like, and you never hang out with your friends. Can you imagine hanging out with a group of friends? Everyone's laughing. You're like, fuck this. This isn't a challenge. Like, what? Right? If you can make things that people have trouble accomplishing, no-brainers and easy and effortless, you can always sharpen your sword on some other shit. And if society fixes every problem for you, and you think you're going to become super soft because you get easy success everywhere from too many support systems, just bang your fucking head against the wall, get tough the old-fashioned way, punch yourself in the face. I don't know. The dieting and the exercise, leave it to the strategies that lead to the most success with, yes, I'll say it, the least amount of effort and discipline and willpower. Because when you set your bars of success high enough, that's the real question, inevitably it will require tons of those things anyway. So try to make it as easy as possible. And can you imagine somebody training to fight an MMA match, and the instructor's like, all right, time to learn heel hooks. These are really, really great for your MMA match. You could be like, nah, that shit makes it too easy, man. Fuck that. I want the old-fashioned way. Like, I want to get hit a lot. Like, what? You can always just abandon your fight plan and just get hit in the face. But if you actually know techniques, that's a good thing. Winning is hard enough by itself. I can't tell you how many people I've had, like, consider a meal delivery system. Like, like I'll just, shameless plug, Trifecta is the one that I get and the one we work with. And, it's like a little bit pricey, but the meals show up and they're exactly what you thought they were. And that can be the difference. Or, buy in bulk or meal prep or cook or whatever. You tell people that and they're like, yeah, okay, I want to make every meal fresh every day though, because I feel like, I literally have people tell me like, that challenges me to do better. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're doing nothing currently. You're wildly out of shape. How about you get in shape the easiest way possible? And then, hey, shit, if that's too easy for you and just knock it out of the park, we can make it harder next time and put you on a bodybuilding stage.
Make it as easy as possible out of the gate, because it's just a matter of time. It will get harder. There's no doubt about that.
If it doesn't, holy shit, you just lost 20 pounds effortlessly. Mission accomplished.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, man. So how does the discipline piece transition eventually into habit? Because you hear numbers thrown around like it takes, 21 days to build a habit, 66 days. Like, how do you make sense of all of that?
So the true number is it takes 666 days to build a habit. I don't think I have to tell you why. It's because his darkness, our Lord, Satan, is behind everything. I don't have to tell you this. Those numbers aren't too far off from what we see in the diet world. We actually now have pretty solid data to back this up from our data analysis on the RP Diet app, which has hundreds of thousands of people. We know when they fall off the wagon. But here's the deal. Discipline is tough. Okay. After a couple of bouts, having to use discipline, having to use point at the discipline gun that shoots willpower, after a couple of those battles between motivation and intention, you might feel a few days or weeks into your diet that you're like, oh, does it ever get any easier? Okay, because this is rough. Right? Your first month of the diet, everything is new. You suck at everything. You suck at cooking your meals. You don't have any strategies worked out. Just novelty alone can make a situation very anxiety producing. If you go in a new airport, you're flying through a new airport you've never flown through. You've just never been there. And your flight is like, you're not late for your flight, but like you got to get there. You could be really, really nervous. But if you've flown through that airport even once, all the novelty in the world, all the crazy people, all the carts, all of this, all of that, all the beeping, it doesn't really bother you because you're like, yeah, it's gate C12. I know where that is. Like, let's just fucking go there. I've been there before, right? And all of a sudden, it's just so much easier. And then you're not worried at all. You're not anxious at all. So what we're talking about here is after days and days and weeks, in our estimate, usually around 4 to 6 weeks is when it starts to get notably better, is you start to build habits. And habits do a really, really, really amazing thing by essentially, and you can conceptualize it in a couple of ways, they give you an artificial boost to meet your intentions that much more easily. They just do. So what ends up happening is things that used to take, okay, from 0 to 50 levels of adherence, you had to cover that entire 50 units of adherence with 40% of, motivation and then, or 40 units of motivation and 10 units of pure willpower. Okay. And let's say, 50 units is all you're getting total motivation and willpower. Luckily that happens to get you all the way to your intention. If you start to build habits, the total distance covered starts to reduce because you're so goddamn good at doing all these things. For example, how much willpower does it take to create meals from scratch? A lot, because holy shit, you have to look up macros, you have to figure out how to cook. Now you're burning yourself alive. You have to turn the stove off. You have to douse everything with water. There's smoke everywhere. Your children are crying. Disaster, right? That's like war, right? And then you got to have enough willpower to go through a war every time you cook. But hold on a second. If you've cooked 5 weeks in a row and now you're cooking, you can basically do in your sleep because it's meal prep. You make the chicken, you close the grill when you're making the chicken, you start cooking up the pasta, and the pasta basically cooks itself and everything's done. You portion it in a Tupperware and you're good to go. But it just doesn't take that much effort. And it becomes almost automatic or automatized, right? Once that happens, it just doesn't require a lot of effort. It doesn't require a lot of motivation to meet that minimum intention anymore, nor does it require a lot of willpower to fill in the gaps, and maybe even hardly any. So over time, as your habits build up, the gaps between your motivation at its lowest point and the intention at every point start to close. So that, some of them close completely, so that maybe instead of having tough days every 3 days when you started your diet, you have truly tough days every 10 or every 14 days towards the end of your diet. But the degree of toughness also reduces. What before would have taken monumental willpower to stick to, now it's just oh God, it's a nuisance. But you can do it because you're in the habit of doing it. A lot of us are in the habits of doing fitness-related things so much that to us, it almost requires perceptively zero motivation to do. And this is super powerful because it's just something you do by default. When I go out to eat, and I'm, most of my meals when I'm going out to eat, even if I'm not dieting for a ton of fat loss or for some kind of competition, they're I'm conscious. You could say, I used to be conscious of my health and conscious of my performance. I want to make good choices. Used to be is the operative word. I am so habituated to eating out that what I notice first on the menu are things with good macros. That's just what the fuck I eat, without any thought. I'm going to pick a lean protein and I'm going to pick some kind of carb that without a ton of fat in it and some veggies. That's just what I draw to on the menu. So it used to be, back in the day, if I went out to eat and I wanted all these delicious, delicious things and super bad foods for me that I shouldn't be having, nowadays I'm so habituated to eating quote unquote clean, right? Which is its own whatever weasel word voodoo term. But I'm so habituated to making decent choices. This is kind of what I do anyway, right? Imagine you're this is kind of a stupid analogy, but imagine someone comes to your house and they're all right, we don't want to yell at anyone on the street. You're oh, okay. They're okay, that's good. So it's going to be tough. You're going to have to use willpower to make sure you don't yell at anyone on the street. You're okay, I don't habitually yell at people on the street. As a matter of fact, you could say I have a very developed habit of just not doing that. So in order to get me to do that, you would have to be out of my way. So imagine if you could say the same thing with working out. Imagine if you could say the same thing with dieting. And the reality that doesn't have to be imagined, it's real. So when people are in the throes of their suffering 3 weeks into a diet and they think, how the hell am I going to keep this up? They just have to hang on for that much longer because slowly but surely over the next several weeks, they're going to be man, things are kind of just not as hard as they used to be. And people are oh, how do you get motivated to go to the gym? And they're going to scratch their head and be motivated. That's just something I do every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. My alarm wakes me up at 6 and I just go to the gym. And they're oh, must take a lot of, I'm sure you've heard this kind of stuff before, aimed at you, must take a lot of willpower. And you're does it? And you're first time ever someone tells you you're yeah, I'm a fucking hero. I'm Captain America. I do what it takes in the face of evil. Damn it! And then you give it some more thought. Once you have habits, you're just I can't really feel like a hero. That's just something I would do anyway. How much do you pat yourself on the back for brushing your teeth? hopefully not a lot, right? Why? Because brushing your teeth is something like, you're getting cozy for the night. You go in the bathroom, you brush your teeth, and that's it. It's not particularly challenging. Now, the thing is, when you were a kid, it was challenging. It was a fight. You had to use a lot of discipline and willpower, have your support system of your mom and dad yell at you, right? To make sure you brush your teeth and check the backs of your teeth with a mirror or whatever the hell people do. And that's just not the thing anymore, because over time, practice might not make perfect, but it makes much better, makes things easier. And remember, the line of attention doesn't necessarily go any higher unless you change your goal, right? Like, you still have to do the things you have to do. Like, you eat four balanced healthy meals at the beginning of your diet. At the end of the day, you eat four balanced healthy meals. Now, you might reduce the calories a bit, or you might not. Very, very similar kind of process day to day. You practice that, and eventually it becomes really, really second nature, and it just does not require nearly as much willpower, nearly as much motivation. And all of a sudden, you have this extra support system, and it beats every single other one. Because as long as you stay adherent, it refuels itself. And habits have the opposite effect of willpower. It's not a battery. It's like a growing tree. The more it grows, the bigger the tree is, and the more it grows on top of that. So if you keep doing it, habits are just rock solid, and you can rely on them for all intents and purposes, infinity. Like, once you have an exercise habit or an eating habit, you probably just continue to eat well and exercise well for as long as you live, until a disruptive event happens, right? And then you might need to sort of gear back into the habit. But if you've had an old habit before, gearing back into it has a rough patch for sure, right? But then it builds up even faster, quicker, to back to its maximum before, and then you're back on it. And it really nasty, this isn't really an analogy of, I guess we'll call it a homology, right? Habits can be bad. And we all know how bad habits are tough to break. But the thing is, good habits are the same. They're the same habit dynamic, and they're tough to break, which is a fucking excellent thing. So, if you have a drug habit, you need a seriously disruptive event to get you away from drugs, like rehab, or like moving to a different town or different country or something like that, entirely changing a group of friends. Right? What about diet and exercise? Same, right? So if someone's like dieting and exercising really well and they're in the habit of it, someone's like, hey, do you want to go to a weekend and just drink booze and stuff? Like, yeah, I just got to get my morning run in, and I'm just going to eat mostly healthy meals, and I'll cheat with you guys once that night. And they're going to be like, well, why are you doing that? And you're like, I don't know. It's just what I do, right? Like, you don't have to, you don't have to be like, oh, hey there, drug addicts, how are you going to get your fix? They'll find their fix one way or another. And if you're habituated to exercise and dieting in a very positive way, you're going to do what it takes. Not because you're like, oh, I'm relentless, I'm never going to stop. You just like kind of float into it. It's just something you do.
Now, something that I see with folks is they might build some habits up, and then over the course of time, those habits just slowly start to slip, or other habits slowly start to creep in. So they might, weight loss never happens overnight, but maybe, small things start to creep into the diet, and then weight starts to slowly climb, and, those habits start to slowly fall by the wayside. How do you recommend that folks stay on top of their habits, or just sort of keep track of when things might be starting to slip a little bit?
Totally. So there needs to be some kind of willpower in place to keep you on track anyway. One of the ways, this is a little bit of a potential downside of habits. Habits make things so easy, but sometimes you can get really untrained in using discipline. And then you sort of assume that the habit has taken everything, and then you start to slip, because when the motivation still falls below intention, you slip up. And then you slip up and you don't really care, and you slip up and you don't really care. Your results start to slip a little bit. And then it turns out that you're not really practicing realigning yourself, which, habits, yes, they do reinforce themselves, but if you don't pay attention to something, it inevitably becomes chaotic and sort of goes off the rails. So that's a big part of it. You have to realize that, look, like, I have these habits and it's great, but like, when I have to do what I have to do, I still have to not up and do it. That's one part. Another part, there's going to be two more parts. Another part is habits are good, very powerful, if there is a motivation and an underlying goal, right? A lot of the folks that end up getting out of habits, there's no longer something they're streaming or striving for, right? Big example is people meet their fat loss goal, right? They did it. They lost 20 pounds by Christmas. And now they sort of don't have a goal. and they don't have, their habits were designed for a universe in which there was a distinct goal. And now that there isn't one, when they don't execute whatever they're supposed to, they don't even use discipline to bring themselves back. Because what are you bringing yourself back to? You say, well, back to intention. Intention to do what? I don't know. Eat? Well, it's too nebulous and it can't be defined. So a lot of times people slip away. They need better goals. And a really big goal, and something we try to push at RP a lot, is the idea of maintenance as a goal. Your goal is to have a stable body weight and to eat predominantly well and to exercise well for all these great things that all those things do, right? That still requires some willpower, still requires some discipline. And when you understand these as goals, your intention is rock solid because you know what it takes to get to continue to have these health behaviors. And then all of a sudden, habits are very tough to break because the habits are pointed to a specific goal, right? That's a very, very important thing to consider here. Habits don't just do it on themselves. Habits are a tool to get somewhere. And if your where breaks down, your habits can float off. And it takes a while. A lot of people, as you'll probably notice from your experience, sort of do a lot of stuff for a while, but slowly it's kind of like a car, like one wheel falls off, then another tire pops, then the steering wheel falls off, kind of that sort of situation. Lastly, and this is really big, all of the support in the world, all the positive things in the world can't beat, in the long run, chronic fatigue, and especially the fatigue of having to do things and execute things, right? So in the end, you need a break. And as a matter of fact, you need regular breaks. If you are fat loss dieting, if you are dieting for health, if you're doing this or if you're doing that, if you're exercising, at some point, the fatigue and the staleness builds up, and either you start to slip slowly or you do a much better thing. You understand when this is happening, or you even preempt it, and you take some sort of break, psychological break, physical break. Let yourself resettle, wash away all the fatigue, and then get back on track. Much, much better for it to be planned or auto-regulated in the sense of when you know for a fact that you're going to need a break, take it, versus like what I call in stupid strength training, auto-deloading, which is the only deload when you get hurt. Like, yes, I'm not overhead pressing today since I tore my delt off the bone. Like, that's not how you want to deload. You want to deload the week before you do that, right? So a lot of times, and this is one of our coaches, Dr. Melissa Davis. She's a neuroscientist by trade, actually. She's super big on the following of psychologically, diets to lose fat, challenging diet, have to be seen necessarily as short-term. There is no fat loss lifestyle. That's bullshit. Because first of all, if you actually did that, you would eventually die from lack of body weight if you actually kept going. And worse, not worse than death. But luckily, you won't get that far because you will break psychologically before that's even possible. Because there's no like living the rest of your diet without ice cream, living the rest of your life. It's just not going to happen. So what you want to do is have a pulsatility to it. And the best analogy here, again, it's not much of an analogy, it's a homology, it's the same process in a different perspective, is like the work week and vacations, right? Like you could love your job, but if you never take any weekends or days off, you're going to fucking burn out. And you may love your job, but you need a vacation every now and again. If anything else, just to resettle and heal all your fatigue so you can do a good job again, even if you still love it. So just the same way, once, let's say you're dieting for the holidays, right? And you're losing 20 pounds over 4 months. Once you get there, enjoy the fucking holidays. Now, that doesn't mean you fall off completely. You still want to eat mostly healthy foods. You still want to keep up with most of your exercise, but less than you're capable of. So that every day you feel like, man, this is so easy. I'm just kicking ass. And then you gain 2 or 3 pounds over the holidays, maybe even 5. Fuck it, who cares? You feel so refreshed and so relaxed that come January, you're like, oh, I can't wait for this next fat loss diet. And you lose another 15 pounds and get the leanest you've ever been. And then maintenance is super easy because you know you're doing it. You have the goal of doing it. Maybe you even set another goal for yourself. Now I want to gain weight. I want to gain muscle. I want to compete in this competition. Keeping your goals fresh, keeping things fun, keeping things new is also super important in the long run, but breaks are monumentally important. I've talked to tons and tons of people who've started whatever, insert fad diet of choice. And I'm like, so you're doing keto? They're like, yeah. How long are you going to do keto for? They're like, well, forever, right? No, you're fucking not. You're not going to do keto forever. You're going to snap and eat all the ice cream in the world, because ice cream beats everything after a long enough time. If you don't let yourself have some ice cream every now and again in a planned way and really relax, you're going to break for sure.
You mentioned maintenance as a goal. Now, we love novelty, like humans are wired to seek it out. Do you think that that is why having maintenance as a goal is just so difficult, because of the novelty piece?
Yes. And in addition to that, it doesn't seem like an achievement.
Right.
It seems like, okay, my goal is to stay in place. Like, yeah. And that can be really tough, which is why I think most people need the psychological huge benefit and establishment of stability of at least for several months trying maintenance as a goal, so they can maybe come to peace with themselves over food and their bodies and things like that, or more of a peace. But I think in the end, the best kind of goals are maybe goals that are not just maintenance, but different activity and athletic goals. Getting into a running club and trying to run a 5K, doing some cycling, doing some boat racing, doing some swimming, getting into a team sport, trying to gain a little muscle, trying to lose a little fat, taking some dance classes. And in the meantime, those goals keep you focused in such a way that it's your diet and everything supports them. The high activity levels prevent weight gain, and all of a sudden you're in a really good position to be weight maintenance. But just maintaining your healthy weight and doing quote unquote exercise tends to not be that great of a goal, because new and different things tend to really, really reinvigorate that process.
Got it. Okay, so passion is the last part of the puzzle. Now, this honestly is probably going to apply to such a small percentage of people. We'll probably just breeze through it quite quickly. But can you explain passion?
Yeah, passion is when the positive feedback loop on the process of dieting or exercise or whatever you're talking about starts to really compound on itself. You really, really like, let's say, dieting. You like cooking all the clean meals. You like how it makes your body feel. You start doing competitions and you start winning those, and you fall in love with it. And then all this other stuff pretty much goes out the window, because now you are really an addict in the true sense of the word, and there's nothing stopping you. And then you don't need inspiration anymore. You don't need motivation anymore. Willpower is like some kind of joke. You actually need to start exerting willpower sometimes to not overdo things. Like if I had the leg workout I wanted, I would overreach in a single session. I would destroy my body irreparably. So I got to be like, okay, I really want to train legs with like a nuclear bomb, but I'm just going to use a small 500-pound bomb on my legs instead, because I know I need to train legs again later that week. So passion is a thing that it's difficult to plan for. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. It's also not required. There's hundreds and hundreds of people, that I know that are not passionate about working out or eating particularly healthy, but it gets they're really passionate about it. But because they're in the habit of doing it and they're adequately motivated with proper goals, they're doing it for years and years, and they'll do it for the rest of their lives. Passion can be enhanced. You can enhance the chance that you'll enter passion by keeping the process challenging, rewarding to that challenge, and really, really fun, and having a well-knit social community around it also helps. So for example, you pick up racquetball and you start to get pretty fucking good at it, and all your friends play racquetball, and then you start to win championships with your friends, and you just start to love and love and love it, and all of a sudden you have a passion for racquetball. You're going to be on the court. People have to physically pull you off that shit, right? So that's an awesome, awesome thing, and you can stack the deck in your favor, but sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It's not for everyone to have passion. Now, we'll tell you this. Some people will say like, oh man, like I want to have a passion for fitness, but I don't. That is not a realistic goal. Okay, the goal is to have a habit and to try to make things as good as possible. Passion, you can't have as a goal. It either comes or doesn't. Very similar to how it works between people, right? Like, can you like hope to have passion with your sexual partner? Like, man, you can stack the deck in favor by picking a person that's awesome and trying to be great to them and them to you and doing fun things together. But look, after some time, it's going to be apparent that a passion is either showing up or not showing up. So it's not something you have a huge amount of say in. You can stack the deck in favor of it, but habit is enough by a long shot.
Yeah, that's a great analogy as far as relationships go, because I think passion is largely out of our control. And I mean, if you are incredibly passionate about fitness and health and all of this sort of stuff, like you're probably already a personal trainer and nutrition coach to begin with. So
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. All right, man. That was awesome, Mike. Where can folks learn more about you, your social handles, all that good stuff? Where can they find you?
Totally. So if folks are interested in some of this stuff, we actually have some YouTube videos that's coming out. Renaissance Periodization on YouTube. You search our Renaissance Periodization or Renaissance Strength, RP Strength, my last name, Israetel on YouTube. It's going to get you to our channel. We've got tons and tons of videos all the time. Our new YouTube initiative. RP Strength is the company that I help co-found and run. It is on Instagram, or Renaissance Periodization is the whole name. It's at RP Strength on Instagram. We have over 500,000 followers. Isn't that neat? For whatever that gets us for. And then I'm on Instagram as RPDRMIKE, RP Dr. Mike. I'm also on Facebook. Facebook is dying. But Instagram's still cool. So that's all our stuff. And of course, if you go to the RP Strength Instagram, you'll be routed to our website if you click on enough things. There's renaissanceperiodization.com. And you can pick up books and articles and download apps and all this other stuff. If you are interested in trying the app, it's a 2-week free trial, and it's on the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. Just RP Diet, and all of a sudden you have a little mini coach in your pocket.
I will link to all that stuff in the show notes. And thanks for coming on today. That was awesome.
Thank you for having me. I thought this was a great chat.
So that wraps up the interview with Dr. Mike Israetel. There was a lot of information in that episode, so I thought I'd boil down the most important points for you guys as actionable takeaways, because I want you guys to benefit from listening to these episodes. That's what this is all about. So the take-homes. You're likely already inspired because you're listening to this podcast, and you're probably quite motivated as well because you've made it this far in the episode. So identify your intention, right? What do you want, and make it super specific. Then put your detailed plan in place and follow that thing, whether you're having an awesome day or a not so awesome day. And eventually, if you implement something sustainable, it's going to become habitual given enough time. And then you are laughing, right? When you've developed healthy habits, you're in a great spot, because it's no harder to follow through with healthful habits than it is not so healthful habits, because by definition, you're doing it automatically. So here's a call to action today. Identify what you really want, put your plan in place, and get rolling, guys. If you're interested in personalized one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the show notes below, or head over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Also, friend me up on Instagram at N1Fitness and on Facebook at Marcus Sadu, and I will catch you guys on the next episode. See ya.